It's 3:17 a.m., June 22, 2025, and deep inside Iran's Fordow nuclear facility, quite literally a fortress carved into solid mountain rock, alarms suddenly scream to life. But here's the thing. There's no incoming radar signature, no missile trail streaking across the sky. Just 7 ghostly triangles, invisible to every defense system Iran possesses, carrying the most devastating bunker-busting weapons ever deployed in combat. What happened next would reshape the Middle East forever and set the stage for the most vivid path to World War III ever. Welcome to the channel, where we dissect the weapons that define modern warfare. Today, we're diving into Operation Midnight Hammer, the most audacious military strike since the raid that killed bin Laden. We're talking about 30,000-pound bombs that can punch through mountains, stealth technology that makes $2.2 billion aircraft vanish from radar, and Iran's lightning-fast retaliation that proved even superpowers aren't untouchable. This isn't just another geopolitical analysis. This is the story of cutting-edge weapons meeting centuries-old strategic calculations, where the wrong move could ignite the Third World War. So, buckle up, because by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why military experts are calling this the most dangerous escalation since the Cuban Missile Crisis. To understand the insanity of what unfolded, we need to rewind the clock. See, for months, Iran had been playing nuclear brinksmanship, enriching uranium to levels that brought them tantalizingly close to weapons-grade material. Their 3 primary facilities, Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan, were by far the crown jewels of Iran's nuclear ambitions. But here's where it gets fascinating from a weapons perspective. Iran didn't just build these facilities anywhere. Fordow, for example, is literally carved into the side of a mountain with hundreds of feet of solid rock protecting it from conventional attack. And Natanz sits behind multiple layers of hardened concrete and steel. These weren't just nuclear facilities, they were engineering marvels designed to withstand everything short of a direct nuclear strike. Iran's strategy was simple: make their nuclear program too expensive and too risky to attack. They calculated that no conventional weapon could penetrate their mountain fortress. They calculated wrong. The American arsenal unleashed. At exactly 11:30 p.m. Eastern Time on June 21st, 7 B-2 Spirit bombers lifted off from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. This, by the way, was nearly half of America's entire stealth bomber fleet. A commitment of resources so massive it hadn't been seen since the opening nights of the Iraq War. But here's what makes the B-2 absolutely terrifying as a weapons system. It's not just a bomber, it's a flying contradiction of physics. Somehow, this 172-foot wingspan aircraft has a radar cross-section smaller than a large bird. Iran's Russian-built S-300 air defense systems, which, by the way, are among the most sophisticated in the world, were scanning empty sky while death approached at 50,000 feet. The mission profile was a masterpiece of military deception. Here's why. Some B-2s flew west across the Pacific as decoys, forcing Iran to split its defensive attention, while the main strike force approached from the east. These aircraft flew nonstop for over 34 hours, refueled multiple times by KC-135 tankers, covering a round-trip distance of more than 15,000 miles. Think about the logistics for a moment. America launched a strike mission that began in Missouri cornfields and ended in Iranian mountains, all while remaining completely invisible to the enemy until the bombs were already falling. That's not just military technology. That's projecting godlike power across half the planet. And it was just the beginning. Now, let's talk about the weapon that made this entire operation possible. And this is where things get absolutely mind-blowing. The GBU-57AB Massive Ordnance Penetrator, or MOP, had never been used in combat before Operation Midnight Hammer, but 14 of these 30,000-pound monsters were dropped that night, and they were announced to the world with baptism by fire. We're talking about a 20-foot-long missile that weighs as much as 10 cars and is specifically engineered to punch through the kind of hardened targets that nations build when they absolutely positively need to protect something from attack. The MOP isn't just a big bomb, it's a precision-guided battering ram that can penetrate over 200 feet of hardened concrete before detonating. Now, with that image in mind, 6 B-2 bombers dropped 12 of these behemoths on Fordow alone. As you can imagine, the impact was so massive that seismic stations across the region registered the explosions as minor earthquakes. Satellite imagery, too, will later reveal craters so deep they look like meteor strikes. But here's the engineering marvel that makes this weapon truly insane. Despite weighing 30,000 pounds, the MOP can be guided to within feet of its intended target. That's right, GPS guidance systems, hardened against jamming, ensure that even if Iran managed to detect the incoming bombers, there was nothing they could do to prevent the precision destruction of their protected assets. While they were more than enough, the bunker busters weren't the only American weapons singing their deadly song that night. In fact, more than 24 Tomahawk cruise missiles screamed towards Iran's Isfahan nuclear facility, each one carrying 1,000 pounds of high explosives and the kind of precision that can hit a specific window in a specific building. See, here's the thing. Modern Tomahawks aren't your father's cruise missiles. These weapons can loiter over target areas, receive updated targeting information mid-flight, and even abort their missions if intelligence changes. They fly at treetop level, following terrain contours so precisely that they can navigate mountain valleys while remaining invisible to radar until the final seconds before impact. But beyond their destructive power, the timing of the Tomahawk strikes reveals the sophisticated choreography of modern warfare. These missiles arrived at their targets exactly 27 minutes after the first bunker busters hit Fordow, precisely calculated to overwhelm Iranian emergency response systems and maximize psychological impact. So, with that said, what happened next? The aftermath, when mountains bleed. The immediate aftermath of this attack revealed both the devastating effectiveness of American weapons and the harsh realities of modern warfare. President Trump's initial claims of obliterating Iran's nuclear program proved to be typical political hype, but the damage assessment told a more nuanced story. Satellite analysis showed at least 6 massive craters at the Fordow site, with debris scattered across a whopping 2-mile radius. The mountain facility that Iran believed was impregnable had been turned into Swiss cheese by American precision munitions. But here's the fascinating thing about hardened targets. Even 30,000-pound bombs can't guarantee complete destruction of facilities designed with redundancy and backup systems. Intelligence assessments suggested at the moment that while the strikes dealt a significant blow to Iran's nuclear program, potentially setting it back by 18 to 24 months, the facilities weren't completely destroyed. See, modern nuclear programs are designed with exactly this kind of attack in mind, with critical equipment distributed across multiple hardened sites and backup facilities. On the other hand, the human cost was immediate and tragic. Iranian authorities reported 610 killed and 4,746 injured. And here's the thing, these weren't just military targets. They were facilities staffed by scientists, engineers, technicians, and support personnel. The precision of American weapons couldn't eliminate the reality that 30,000-pound bombs create destruction far beyond their intended targets. Iran strikes back. The Al-Udeid surprise. Iran's response to the attack was debated by many, but nonetheless came with lightning speed and surgical precision of its own. Less than 48 hours after American bombs cratered their nuclear facilities, Iran missiles streaked toward one of the most important U.S. military installations in the Middle East, the Al-Udeid Air Base in Qatar. Now, here's the thing. The choice of Al-Udeid wasn't random. It was strategic genius. This base serves as the regional headquarters for U.S. Central Command, housing thousands of American troops and serving as the nerve center for American military operations across the entire Middle East. By hitting Al-Udeid, Iran demonstrated that American forces throughout the region were vulnerable to retaliation while carefully avoiding the catastrophic escalation that would result from striking targets within the United States itself. But what weapons did Iran use to penetrate American defenses and strike back at the world's most powerful military? Well, Iran fired a barrage of short and medium-range missiles, likely including their Fateh-313 and Zulfiqar systems, which are sophisticated, precision-guided weapons that represent decades of indigenous development under crushing international sanctions. But here's what makes Iran's missile program absolutely fascinating. Unable to purchase advanced weapons on the international market, Iran was forced to develop domestic capabilities that many experts now consider the most advanced in the Middle East outside of Israel. The Fateh-313, for example, has a range of 500 kilometers and can hit targets with accuracy measured in meters, not kilometers. These aren't the crude rockets that Iran's proxy forces typically fire. These are precision weapons with advanced guidance systems designed to penetrate sophisticated air defenses and hit specific buildings within heavily defended military complexes. In fact, the successful strike on Al-Udeid revealed an uncomfortable truth about modern warfare. Even the most advanced missile defense systems can be overwhelmed by a determined adversary with sufficient resources. See, American Patriot batteries and other defensive systems at the base were designed primarily to counter aircraft and cruise missiles, not the high-altitude, high-speed trajectory of ballistic missiles. Basically, Iran's missiles approached their targets from space itself, plunging downward at speeds exceeding Mach 5 in their terminal phase. Current American missile defense technology struggles with this kind of threat, especially when multiple missiles arrive simultaneously and follow unpredictable flight paths. In the end, the Pentagon reported no American casualties from the Iranian strike, a fact that raises intriguing questions about whether this was the result of American defense capabilities, Iran restraints, or simply fortunate timing. The weapons comparison: David's precision versus Goliath's power. The contrast between American and Iranian weapons is extremely fascinating, as it gives us insights into modern military strategy and the changing nature of warfare. For example, America deployed some of the most advanced weapon systems ever created, stealth bombers that cost more than some nations' entire defense budgets, precision-guided bunker busters developed specifically for the most challenging targets, and a global logistics network capable of projecting devastating power anywhere on Earth within hours. Iran's arsenal, on the other hand, while sophisticated, is a fundamentally different approach. Rather than trying to match American technological superiority dollar for dollar, Iran focused on developing weapons that could be mass-produced, widely distributed, and used to impose unacceptable costs on American forces throughout the region. And the thing is, the numbers tell a staggering story. Each B-2 bomber costs approximately $2.2 billion to build and operate. The 14 bunker buster bombs dropped in Iran cost roughly $3.5 million each. That's nearly $50 million in munitions alone, not including the massive logistical costs of the operation. On the other hand, Iran's missile response likely cost a fraction of the American operation. Modern Iranian missiles range from $50,000 to $500,000 each, depending on their sophistication. This economic asymmetry creates a strategic problem for America. Iran can potentially impose costs on American forces at a rate far exceeding what it costs Iran to maintain the threat. But that isn't the full picture because American military power is fundamentally about global reach. B-2 bombers flying from Missouri to Iran and back represent a capability that no other nation on Earth can match. This global strike capability allows America to project power anywhere, anytime, without requiring forward bases or allied cooperation. Iran's weapons, however, are regionally focused but potentially more effective within their sphere of influence. Basically, their missiles can reach targets throughout the Middle East, threatening American bases from Kuwait to Afghanistan. And while they lack intercontinental capabilities, this regional focus allows Iran to concentrate resources on weapon systems specifically designed for their strategic environment. So, with that said, where do we go from here? The escalation trap. Where do we go from here? This exchange of precision strikes between the two sides does more than tell us we are in danger, but also reveals just how dangerous the dynamics of modern warfare really are. Because somehow, this is a war front where technological sophistication meets ancient strategic calculations. Here is the terrifying irony. By attacking Iran's nuclear facilities, the United States may have actually increased the likelihood that Iran will eventually acquire nuclear weapons. Because in the end, nothing motivates a nation to develop nuclear capabilities quite like being attacked by a nuclear-armed superpower. It's the weird nuclear paradox. Iran's leadership is undoubtedly drawing lessons from this exchange. American conventional weapons, no matter how advanced, cannot completely eliminate hardened nuclear facilities, but nuclear weapons create an entirely different strategic calculus, one that makes direct military action far more dangerous and less likely. But moving away from nukes, Iran's real strength isn't in its conventional military. It's in its network of proxy forces throughout the region. I mean, look at it. Hezbollah in Lebanon possesses over 150,000 rockets and missiles. The Houthis in Yemen have demonstrated the ability to strike targets throughout the Gulf. Shia militias in Iraq have access to sophisticated weapons and intimate knowledge of American military installations. If Iran chooses to fully activate this network, American forces could face sustained attacks from multiple directions simultaneously. This disrupted threat is much harder to counter than traditional military formations, and it would force the United States to either escalate dramatically or accept ongoing casualties throughout the region. As it stands, military analysts are warning that the Middle East now sits on a knife's edge, with the potential for this exchange to escalate into a wider regional war. And it makes a lot of sense after all. Iran has demonstrated that it can strike American bases despite their many sophisticated defenses. America, on the other hand, has proven it can penetrate Iran's most protected facilities despite decades of defensive preparations. The risk of miscalculation is enormous. A single Iranian missile that kills American troops or an American strike that hits the wrong target could trigger an escalation spiral that neither side can control. But then there's also the ceasefire issue. The ceasefire question. Temporary peace or strategic pause? As it stands, reports suggest that Qatar has mediated a ceasefire agreement between Iran and the United States, but history teaches us that Middle Eastern ceasefires are often temporary arrangements rather than permanent solutions. Sure, Trump tweeted that peace has come to the Middle East and Israel and Iran are in a complicated ceasefire, but both sides have demonstrated their capabilities and resolve. America has shown that no target is beyond the reach of its precision weapons. Iran has proven that American forces throughout the region remain vulnerable to retaliation. The question now is whether this mutual demonstration of capability will lead to genuine de-escalation or simply a strategic pause before the next round of escalation. So, what have we learned from this exchange of precision firepower and strategic calculation? The weapons used in Operation Midnight Hammer and Iran's retaliation are quite literally the cutting edge of modern warfare, but they also reveal its fundamental limitations. American technological superiority can crater mountains and penetrate the most sophisticated defenses, but it cannot eliminate the political incentives that drive nations to seek nuclear weapons in the first place. Iran's response demonstrated that regional powers, despite facing overwhelming conventional disadvantages, can still impose significant costs on global superpowers through asymmetric strategies and precision weapons of their own. So here's the thing. The real winner in this exchange may be the military-industrial complexes on both sides, which benefit from continued tension and the constant need for more advanced weapons systems. The losers here obviously are the civilians caught in the crossfire and the global community that must navigate an increasingly dangerous world where precision weapons make conflict more tempting and potentially more devastating. So here's my question for you. Given what we've seen, do you think the deployment of 30,000-pound bunker busters was a legitimate response to Iran's nuclear program? Or was it a dangerous escalation that makes wider conflicts more likely? And more importantly, when nations possess weapons this precise and this devastating, does their very existence make war more or less likely? The technology exists to level mountains and penetrate the deepest bunkers, but the strategic calculations that drive nations to build those bunkers in the first place remains as complex as ever. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Iran's precision retaliation? Do you see this as a successful deterrence or dangerous escalation? And what weapons system impressed you the most in this exchange of cutting-edge military technology? If you found this deep dive into the weapons that nearly triggered World War III as fascinating as I did, smash that like button and subscribe for more in-depth analysis of the military technology shaping our world. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the weapons and conflicts that define modern warfare. Until next time, stay informed, stay curious, and remember, understanding these weapons isn't about glorifying conflict. It's about understanding the tools that shape our world and the strategic calculations that determine whether they're used for deterrence or destruction. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.